Morning everybody, how you doing today? In this episode of the show, we're going to talk about the shaky underpinnings of a lot of the code out there using a really interesting and funny example. So I stumbled across this great Wired article that related back to a talk that was given last week in Las Vegas by Joseph Taro, explaining the challenges he's had with his vanity license plate in California. Immediately I was intrigued because I'm thinking, how does somebody get a talk in at a major security conference around a license plate? Well, it turns out he had a vanity plate, and that vanity plate simply said, "NULL." Genius. Now, he wasn't looking for trouble when he set out on this, as you can read from the Wired article, and I fully recommend that you read it through. But he wasn't looking for trouble. He was simply looking for a great vanity plate. He jokes that he was going to try to get void for his partner's car, so they could be null and void. And as a nerd, I can totally appreciate the sort of concise genius of having a vanity plate that says null. But the interesting thing is the story he tells in this talk. Essentially what ends up happening is that he starts to get all of the errors out of the parking ticket database system. So if there is a ticket that's written that doesn't have a proper license plate assignment, it ends up getting associated to his record. And at first this didn't really cause any issues. It's sort of grown over time. And that's a really interesting thing, because a lot of people don't realize how shaky a lot of this code is. There's a huge push to get things out the door really, really quickly, to make sure that you're kind of building a minimally viable product, an MVP, and that you're testing and iterating, and all that's really, really great. Except for a lot of the time, you build up a significant amount of technical debt. Now, we've talked about technical debt and how that's really just a whole bunch of security issues waiting to happen. But this sort of theme keeps coming back, and I really wanted to bring it up because I thought this story was absolutely hilarious. That, and unfortunately for Mr. Taro, is he had to deal with this, is that he has all these fines that are associated to him, and they're like, hey, pay us, and he's like, they're not mine, and he had to work through this stuff. But I think the best part about this story was at the end, when a journalist, Christopher, comes through and says, you know what, you deserve it. Like, you were asking for it. Because Christopher's last name is actually Null. And he's had to deal with this his whole life. And he's got these great anecdotes in that, some people won't accept email from his domain, nullmedia.com. American Express has dropped him off its books, apparently altogether, because of the last name. And this, again, highlights the weakness in a lot of software. And I think that's the real challenge, is that we've accepted as a digital citizenry, we've accepted a certain amount of stuff just crashes. Right? Like, you're using your iPad, something crashes, you're like, oh, just restart the app and it's good. You're playing a video game and it crashes, you're like, okay, it happens. You get frustrated, you move on, you don't think of it. You reboot your Windows systems, several times a week. It's not a big deal. This is just something that we accept. But the problem is that each of those is generated from an error somewhere. As much as we know that computers are logical and they will execute the same thing over and over and over again, they are infinitely complex, or not actually infinitely complex, but ridiculously complex is probably a better way to phrase it. And they're programmed by humans, and we make mistakes all the time. An anecdote I did that I use quite often when trying to explain some of the challenges around cybersecurity specifically is a while back I actually did some digging and tried to figure out how many lines of code could execute in a normal system trying to ask for a web page. And it turns out it's somewhere around 100 million. Now, how did I get to 100 million? Well, you've got the basic input-output system, your BIOS on your computer that boots up. There is code in the microprocessor. There's code in the video card. There is code in the hard drive. There's code in all of the hardware that then boots up into the software stack, which is ridiculously large, which then boots up into the OS, which is ridiculously large, which then boots up into the browsers and application layer, and all this stuff. There's just a mountain of code, around 100 million lines. Now, errors on any number of those, and there are a ton of those errors, could lead to security issues. Now, this Wired story, I just got a good chuckle out of, because in the end, it's relatively harmless, but we do know that from security vulnerabilities, from common misconfigurations, that there are real world and real significant consequences to these types of mistakes. Now, in the case of NULL, that's basic 101 stuff, and yet it's still happening time and time again, right? When I see a complicated technical breach, I'm like, whew, thanks. Like, I appreciate the fact that this is technically complicated and it would have gotten anybody. When we see the basics, and the basics happen time and time and time again, that to me says that something is very, very rotten in the state of technology creation and software development, and that we need to do better. This ties back to my comment earlier on the last episode there around AppSec being dead. Security and privacy needs to be built in by design. The way we do that is by educating, helping people understand how to build better from day one as well as after the fact. But right now, all of our efforts are after the fact. We're trying to catch this stuff after the horse has left the barn. We need to work better. We need to build it in. We need to get people to understand that sometimes going slightly slower but generating higher quality technology is better. And I think as citizens, as consumers, we need to be able to accept that. But as developers, as technologists, we absolutely need to hold to that, because we can't keep making these mistakes. Because while the NULL case is harmless, what about the ones that aren't? Let me know what you think. Hit me up online at marknca, in the comments down below, and as always, by email me at markn.ca. We'll talk about this and everything else under the sun and on the digital interwebs. See you on the next episode of the show.